Hey, I'm so glad you're here. We are going to have a fun time talking about books today with my darling Keri Vasek. How are you, Keri?
I'm so good. This is one of my favorite topics. So I'm excited to
I know,
chat.
me too. I'm super excited because it is something that I don't know. I really think if you can only implement a few things into your routine, reading aloud, I mean,
It's like the
one
big
of the top three.
it's the biggest bang for your buck, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about why do we want to do it? Why do we want parents to read aloud to their children on the daily?
Gosh, there's so many reasons, right?
All right? Yeah.
It's like there's not just one reason.
Well, let's go through them. What are some of the reasons?
I mean, let's start with the most simple connection. Like just straight
The
up
straight
connection.
up connection. That's right. You know why? Because if you're reading a book, no one's looking at a phone. You're not looking at your phone. They're not looking at your phone. Connection. It is a time where you can check out from everything else and just be present. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's
Yeah,
one of,
and usually there's physical touch when
yes.
you're reading aloud. Sometimes not. Like oftentimes I'll read to my kids and they'll be doing something with their hands, and we'll talk about that later too.
Yeah.
But many times they'll come and curl up next to you, or your kid who doesn't. I have children who do not appreciate being touched a whole lot, but they'll still come and like grab onto my arm, and that's good for everyone's nervous systems. That's
It
that
is.
that physical contact is regulating for everyone. So that would be like just that connection. If there's whenever there's a moment of disconnection, I think it's the fastest way to like bring it back, especially in those little ears.
Yeah, and let's talk about like even our youngest, or even though you don't even have any toddlers anymore, which is hard to believe. You've moved out for the last time of the toddler phase. So toddler and even those young preschoolers, listen, reading aloud to them is often quick. It is interrupted. It is full of movement and even often grabbing of the book and taking over the story, all
Mhm.
of which I applaud. So if you have a toddler or 2-year-old who you're like, I'm not reading to them, it's not worth it. All they do is take the book and they want to, look at the pages. And then I get through 2 pages and they take that book. Yes, that's exactly right. They're showing interest in that. So what do you think about that? A toddler or a 2-year-old, you're sitting down to read Goodnight Moon and they grab it and they
Yeah,
point to
I
the red
agree.
balloon.
So that hasn't been the vibe of my kids. Um, but they are the like, I don't like this story. I
Yeah.
didn't want to do this story. I'm like, all right. Depending on time constraints, because sometimes it's a way to prolong bedtime. So sometimes there are like
Sure.
other things at play. But just at the very basic level, I believe for myself, I don't read books I don't like. So if they don't like a book, if they're like a couple pages into it and they're not jazzed about it, we pick a different book.
Yeah, well, and even more basic than that, I'm thinking those little early years, toddlers, they don't have the attention span to get through a book. I guess that's more where I was going is that, that's why those board books are so short, is because a toddler doesn't have the ability, or a 2-year-old really, to sit for any length of time, sometimes even to get through a board book. So if you are, with that age group and it's frustrating for you, I just want to encourage you, hey, that's normal. It's normal for them to interrupt, grab the book, want to look at the pages. All of that is normal. Now, moving into 3, 4, and 5, that's when you can really get into some sweet storybooks with them. I mean, you're not necessarily reading big chapter books, but you can elaborate on some good stories at that
Yeah.
point.
And it still has value. So even if you're just getting through 2 pages and they're not making it to the end, those 2 pages have value. So it's the process of reading aloud and them just hearing language, which would be this would go on to another benefit of reading aloud is them just hearing language, like written beyond just conversational language. They're hearing the written word, which is more structured technical English typically. And it's how they learn language. Language is not acquired visually. Language is acquired auditorily.
And they're learning different words because we all use the same words, like, families or you yourself. You might have your whatever common words that you use for certain things. And then you go read a book, and that author's going to bring in some new language. So, literally, vocabulary. I mean, it's a way to build their vocabulary, just being introduced to sentence structure, like you said, and different words, a variety so it's a fabulous way to build language.
Well, and that being said, gets to like the value. There is value in the whole story, and there is value. So there's like intrinsic value in the story itself, and there is value in the reading, the hearing of the words, the hearing of the
Yes.
story. And I think especially for our little ones, that's what we're seeing. The value is the purposeful spoken word, that it being introduced to new kinds of words, new structures of sentences. This is honestly how our itty bitty ones start learning grammar.
Yes.
It's how they move from me want cookie to I want a cookie, please. Like it's by hearing the way that people speak sentences. It's hearing a language that allows them to grasp the vocabulary, but then also the grammatical structure without even
Yeah.
knowing what they're doing, which is so cool.
Right. I mean, it's so beneficial. And so, how did that look in your house when your kids were little? How did read alouds go? Did you have a certain time during the day, or was it just at bedtime, or what was your practical?
Always at bedtime.
Yeah.
And then it was honestly, it was what got me through the day. It was, we're having a hard moment. Okay, I'm going to go grab a pile of books and I'm going to sit here and just start reading. And I would often, because I have when my first three were younger, I had just those three. So 3 kids, 3 different ages, young. And I'm just trying, let's be real. So many days you're just trying to live through it.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of like undiagnosed postpartum for a long time. So getting through days, it was books. It was pull out a pile of books. And I would sit on the floor and I would maybe toss out like some paper and crayons or set up watercolors on the kitchen table and sit with books, and I would just start reading. And let them be in and out. Like the book doesn't stop when they're in those young years, when somebody leaves the room or needs to pee or whatever. Like it just keeps going, and I would just keep reading, and they would be in and out and doing things and climbing on me, but I think it was regulating for all of us. But that was primarily how it fit into our day. It was my Hail Mary.
Well, I love that you said that because I just remember too having, kids, lots of kids, different ages. And I remember after having Henry, and I remember piling even in my bed. I mean, if I was nursing Henry or something, they could bring me a book and we could snuggle together. And they felt a part of that whole process. A book was something you could do while you were nursing and you were, having them sit all around you on the sofa or even in the bed. And you can do that. That's the other thing about reading aloud. You can do it anywhere. I mean, books, and what a great thing to take with you. I mean, that you can sit when you have to sit at a doctor's office or somewhere. You don't have to hand them your phone. You can read a book quietly together, sit there together.
What I think is interesting, though, is that I do think most people would be like, yes, read books to young kids. I think oftentimes we just devalue how much it's actually doing. Like, wait, because I will tell people, like, I get asked, the questions about homeschooling frequently, and especially when they're young. And I'll talk to kindergarten parents who are like just starting off, and they ask where to start. Like, honestly, play and read to them. Like, let them play lots and lots and lots of open-ended play and read them books. And there's like a collective like breath held in the room, because how could that possibly be enough for a 6-year-old? And I think it's that when we learn what all is happening when you are reading to a child is when we can start to really appreciate that as a tent pole in our and a cornerstone in our early education of our
Yeah,
children.
it really is. And, I do want to encourage parents, and they'll be like, well, my kid won't sit for me to read. I'll try to read a book and they don't sit. And my question always back is, I would love to know how you're reading that book. Like, because we have different personalities, right? I'm very animated just naturally. You can be. You're not quite typically as animated as your friend here, but you can be. But, I have this little book that I love, Hello Ninja. Do you have that book?
We don't
And
have
so
that.
my gosh, it's so good. But I mean, if you were to read this book to a little kid and it goes, hello, ninja. Yes, hello. And you add in things like the voices. I mean, think about if any of you listen to Audible. I'm a huge Audible fan. You are. I'm listening to a great series right now by Charles Martin. And I love the voices. I love the voices, the way he changes, the narrator changes his tone and changes how he says stuff, and it pulls me in. Well, think about a child. If you're just reading ninjas chop, ninjas love to belly flop. I mean, I wouldn't want to listen to that. Would you want to listen to that?
We had a book, Those Darn Squirrels, that the kids, when they were little, would only let John Michael, my husband, read to them because of his old man Fuquire voice.
Love it.
They
Yes.
were a fan of my old man
You
Fuquire
could pull that off, huh? Okay.
voice. He just pulled off crotchety old man really well.
Yeah,
But they
bless.
loved it. That was a big part of the
Yeah,
experience.
it is a big part of the experience. So I would definitely want to encourage parents listening that listen, even if you're the shyest, most introverted person, you're going to have to dig deep and get some oomph in your reading. Like make it interesting, help draw them in with the way that you tell the story, even if you have to sneak and read the story by yourself at night to practice your voices. Okay, no, not really. But, get excited about reading to kids because that's what draws them in. Imagine it too. I don't know about you, but when I'm reading and I can see, I mean, you can see it on the kids' faces where their imagination is just churning and they're starting to imagine what this story looks like. I mean, a lot of times we're reading picture books, but often you're not showing the kids the picture. Not always. I mean, sometimes you're holding it up showing them. Sometimes they're looking over your shoulder and you're showing them. But sometimes they have to use their imagination to imagine the story. And it's lovely to watch that. We really are setting them up to be able to read without pictures by doing that, by being descriptive and by Anna being.
Or when you see them later, like playing out the book.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
we had like it was like 2 weeks of time when the kids they were older, like mid elementary, where the backyard was Roxaboxen, and they had made their own Roxaboxen, and they were just we weren't reading the book every day, but it was such a constant in our family
Yes.
that they made their own. I would also say when because I hear that a lot too. My kids won't sit still. My other question is, why do your kids need to sit still?
Right. Oh, yeah. That's, yeah. I was just talking about they don't like to be read to, but the sitting still, I would agree. Why do they have to sit still?
Because, and I would say this actually in any subject, even as they get older. I've my little guy who just turned 5 yesterday. He loves math, and when I start, he loves me to give him math problems, like math word problems. Like if you have 5 strawberries and a berry, it's 3 of the strawberries. How many strawberries? The second I start giving him little problems like that, he pops up and starts like pacing back and forth. It's incredible to watch because I know and his eyes are darting every which way, and I know it's because of how his brain is functioning, because movement helps brain function.
Yes.
And watching
It's
that happen
literally stimulates the neurons in the brain to have them doing that movement. That's why, again, we say sensory and all of that stuff is so valuable and allowing a kid to move while you're reading.
yeah, and and have appropriate things for them to
Yes.
do while you're reading. So bring out a bucket of Legos. I had a bin of Legos for a long time that were just plain wooden Legos. Nobody could fight over what colors there were, but just plain wooden Legos. And they were read aloud Legos.
Wow.
Like the only time they came out was during read aloud. Would do like a read aloud basket. Like each kid had like a little basket and they could choose something from their read aloud basket to do during read aloud time. Or I'd set out Play-Doh, or I'd set, because also the more senses we're involving. So not only is it okay for kids to be moving and doing other things, it's actually wildly beneficial for them to be doing that, because the more senses we're engaging, the more neurons are firing, and the more beneficial
Yeah.
that time even.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I think again, it goes back to, I think when you are trying to parent and school, you're not sure if I'm supposed to be replicating school, and in school you have to sit quietly and crisscross applesauce and listen to the book. And I think just kind of unlearning that for yourself, that, oh, wait, that's not how we have to listen to a book. We can be doing other things. I think it's just a switch that you've got to make to recognize that, like you said, not only is it okay, it's actually beneficial. Many kids need that movement in order to regulate their nervous system, in order for them to be able to take in that information that you're reading to them. So I think it is
may also
valuable.
be a switch for us in that, like, we sometimes think like, oh, this is like our soft, quiet time. Well, maybe for some people it is. It might not be for your house. And you just have, like, we have to just fix those expectations to go, okay, this is probably not going to be this smooth, lovely. Nothing in my house was ever like smooth, and I'll talk about it like, and it sounds like it is when I like listen to myself back.
Yeah.
Nothing felt smooth or lovely, or it all felt like clunky and hard, uh and then, but you look back and you're like, oh, we were all learning. You guys were learning. You were getting what you needed. But it just was, it was a little, those waves were a little crashing a little harder than I think I expected my peaceful river reading time to be.
Yeah.
And so adjusting that mindset to be like, okay, our together time is going to be a little chaotic, probably. And my calm, peaceful, sit by the river time needs to happen in my closet later.
With a phone call to me. The other thing I would say on that whole note of expectations is, I always considered it a compliment when a kid would want to stop my reading and ask a question. So if you have the personality where you're like, I'm reading right now, like, don't interrupt me. You can ask questions at the end. Again, for thinking back to our own schooling and what was expected when a teacher would read. So I would encourage you, if your child is interrupting, they're not being rude, they're being curious. And so we need to feed that curiosity, and it is okay to pause and answer questions in the book. It is okay to change the book. If they say, I don't think it should happen that way, well, how do you think it should happen? Or they don't like the ending, what ending would you make? I mean, it is okay for them to get involved and have an opinion and be curious. So welcome that into your reading aloud. Don't discourage that.
I also love, um, I love picture books.
Well,
For
you
so
wrote
many,
one.
I did write one.
You wrote a
Um,
great one. I happen to
I,
have it here. Let me do a commercial for you. Pause. Hold on. Let me do a commercial.
here's
You
what
love
I
picture books. Kisses from Space, you wrote, and we've mentioned it before, but tell us why you love picture books.
So one of the things, and this applies to all children, not just little bitties, but what pictures do is they confirm for you that you are indeed hearing, like you're processing and understanding the words in the way that that they're intended to be. So the pictures are confirming the story. So if you want to talk about reading comprehension, picture books are literally reading comprehension.
Yes.
And so a lot of times, because I am obsessed with reading aloud, it's a question I get most frequently is like, how do I get my 4-year-old into chapter books? Like, tell me why you want to get your 4-year-old into chapter books. And I think one of the things that happens is we have tucked away in our brains also this idea that chapter books, that reading without pictures is somehow superior to reading with pictures. And I just disagree.
I love that. Yeah.
I think pictures add so much, art adds
Yeah.
so much. And I love the question, what do you notice? So we'll read the page and they look at and again engaging other senses. But then so we'll read the page and then before we turn the page, what do you see? What do you notice? And leave it. Don't resist to the urge to make sure they notice what you notice.
Right.
Just let them notice what they notice.
Listen, I love that you say that because I think even now, it's funny, I will pick up a picture book and I can get lost in what I notice. I remember reading Jamie Lee Curtis wrote a book about adoption called Tell Me Again About the Night I Was Born. It is one of my absolute favorite books. And one of the reason is because of the pictures, because it shows, and being an adoptive mom, I don't know if it's but I often thought people thought I had it easier because I didn't birth the baby, but it shows a picture. I remember so clear, and there are bottles everywhere, like half empty bottles, and there's diapers, the burp cloths hanging over the furniture, and it's all in the background. It's not part of the story, but it's so part of the story. It normalized for us as adoptive parents. Yeah, that's exactly the same as when you birth the baby. You have stuff everywhere, and people were sleepy. And I just loved it as an adult. I was so drawn into the story that was told through the pictures. So
Yeah.
anyway, just
So
to
that
confirm what you're saying.
Yeah. There are picture books that every time I read them make me cry. The Quilt Maker's Gift turns me into a freaking puddle every time.
I'm the same with Wilford Gordon McDonald Partridge. The same. That one does me as well.
Yeah. And then so I think that leads to like just the intrinsic value of the story
Yes.
itself. That I just had a conversation with someone the other day about fiction versus nonfiction, and I was explaining why I, for the most part, quit nonfiction about 4 years ago. And not completely. Like I'll read some, but I've lightened up on my own for my own reading of nonfiction because I realized that I believe stories are so transformative for children. I believe they build character. I believe they create experiences. Science shows that they create shared experiences, that when we are reading a book together, whether it's you and one child or multiple children, the reading of that, the sharing of that story does the same thing in your brain than as if you are having that, like living that experience. It's
Wow.
wild. So it's creating bonding shared experiences just by hearing a story together.
Together.
I realized there are all these things that I value about story, and I just started asking myself, when did I start believing that that wasn't true for me? At what point does that turn off and you realize, oh, it doesn't? Story is the intrinsic value of a story is simply because it allows us to see the world through from a different point of view. It allows us, we have like this one angle that we're looking at the world through, and a story allows us to come outside of that, even for young children, to come outside of ourselves and move to a different point of view and experience the world from that point of view.
And
And
it's so
that's
interesting because our young children are still such concrete thinkers, and yet it's beautiful to watch their imagination go on the story with the story. They can understand this world of fiction. Even at an early age, the pretending power is strong, and they can really buy into whatever that story of fiction is, which is lovely to watch. And you think, well, if they're so concrete, how do they do that? But I don't know. I don't know how they. I don't have the brain answer,
I
but I can
always
tell you I've witnessed it. Yeah,
said that books are the most underrated parenting hack. Like,
I think you're right.
you want to teach your kids something, don't tell them. We all know, especially if you
Yes,
have strong-willed kids. Like,
yes.
you read a book,
Find a
and
book about it.
not
Yeah,
necessarily a book that tells the lesson. It doesn't have to be an outright like lesson
yes.
driven book,
How to build a car. No,
but
right.
a book that embodies caring or embodies um, empathy, embodies whatever the thing is
Yes,
that you're trying to
yes.
teach. And then you ask questions about that book. What did you notice about Mama Dragon? What was she feeling? How was
Hmm.
how were the baby dragons feeling when Mama Dragon went away? And then they end up teaching themselves the lesson
Correct. Yeah.
because you're reading it like it's amazing.
I remember when my kids were little, they loved to read the Berenstain books, Berenstain Bears books. They got on a kick of my older ones love that. And so anytime there was an issue, and I even put it in the curriculum, the one on manners, because I thought that was the funniest book back in the day. And my kids loved, and they got so upset at the way they were treating each other so poorly in that book. They were like going, I can't believe she's being so unkind. And I'm like, and I can't believe it was so what you're saying. I mean, they were over there, freaking out over what was happening in the book when they're living it, and then they were pausing and going, this is familiar. This is what I'm doing, and I should probably learn a lesson. So it is good. Listen, wrapping it up, let's talk about, before we close, how read-alouds help a reluctant reader. We've done a whole podcast on reading, so if you missed that, we did it with Keri's mom, reading specialist. Go back and listen to that one. But let's just touch on read-alouds, I think, to me, are one of your biggest weapons when it comes to a reluctant reader. And I know you're living in that a little bit right now in your own world at home, but I have lived it with several of mine. Several of mine were reluctant readers, and read-alouds is my magic weapon. So
here's the funny thing in our house is that my kids, who I would behind the scenes consider reluctant readers, wouldn't consider themselves that. They would tell you, and my oldest for the longest time, I love books. I love to read, before he could read with independently.
Yeah.
Because in our home, there is not reading a book and listening to a book. There is only reading. So you're either reading with your eyes or you're reading with your ears. You're still reading.
Yeah.
So my oldest, who is also a later reader, it was when he wanted bigger books, we just gave him all the audiobooks, and he listened to audiobooks all day and loved books. So there wasn't, I say this frequently, so I've said it in many of the other podcasts, but I think the primary issue we have with kids who we feel don't like a subject, it's not actually the subject itself, it's their relationship to the subject. So if we promote a positive and warm relationship with reading, when you're feeling that pushback with reading, you read aloud. Just keep reading aloud. We don't have a million, tons and tons of kids in this country who do not ever learn how to read. We do have a whole lot of people who think they don't like to read, who never pick up a book, who just don't read. And I think that points to they have a poor relationship with reading. So let's make sure our kids have positive relationships with books themselves, with
Yeah,
the
and
story.
for me, the way that I did that in action was I would read about things they were passionate about. So again, I go to one of my sons was obsessed with superheroes. And so we would go and buy or check out at the library every superhero book because he would watch it all day long and he loved to be read to. It wasn't a problem. But I really wanted him to get into those stories, the superhero stories. And then he wanted to read them so much that it just pushed him over the edge to reading for himself. And then he was devouring Harry Potter in one night when they would come out. I'm like, not sleeping at all to that. I mean, he wouldn't sleep at all because he was reading that. But I think it was so much because we read what they were passionate about. And I did it over and over again, whether it was my daughter who loved horses. So we went and got every book on horses, or even cooking. We got cookbooks and read through cookbooks and looked at cookbooks. And find your kid's passion. Read about that. And that so often will help take you over the edge with reading. Just keep reading aloud. There's no time to stop that either. Keep reading aloud.
Even when they are reading independently, keep reading aloud.
Yes, keep reading aloud. Yeah.
Continue with the audio, even audiobooks. If you're out of steam, turn out have good audiobooks.
Great for the car rides too. Audiobooks are great for car rides when you don't, we don't want to put a video screen in there. You don't know what to do. Get a good audiobook. There are some great narrators.
Okay, now you may disagree with this.
Okay, I'm ready.
This doesn't really fall into your read what they're passionate about. But I have a rule.
Okay, I'm ready.
That applies to games and books in my house. That is, I do not read a book that I don't like, and I don't play a game that I don't like. Because here's why. There are so many good books and there are so many good games. And that changes how I show up to the table
Yeah.
with that book. So John Michael, my husband, is the one who reads the fairy whatever books that my daughter loves, that our daughter loves. He'll read those all day. I'm like, no, that's not what you read with mom. Like if I'm if I'm going to show up here, I get to enjoy this too because it changes I also have an ADHD brain. So I'm not going to do it if I'm bored the whole time. I need to be invested in this story.
Listen, I'm not going to tell you not to be you. I do think it's best if you can read what they're passionate about. Listen, I would have never gotten into Harry Potter ever had it not been for my son. He was obsessed with it. That is the only reason I know who Harry Potter is because of my kid. And I wouldn't have been drawn to that, didn't think I would like it, any of that stuff. And I ended up loving it. So I would say sometimes as an adult, you learn too that you like things that you don't know.
And it is the year of 2025, and we can get the books we don't like on audiobook.
Absolutely. It's so true. And, you have to do you. I mean, this is, again, it's both and. It both can be and either or. Listen, I'm not the girl going to be saying, don't do it this way. You have to do it my way. I'm telling you what's worked for me and a little bit of the science of why I think reading aloud is one of the best things you can do in your home.
So much. And I know we mentioned Audible, but Libby is where it's at. If you're not,
I don't have Libby. I don't even have it.
What are you doing with your life?
Buying Audible books, spending a fortune on books because I go through them so fast because of you.
So
I go through too.
Libby is where it's at, especially if you have like multiple kids. Like you don't want to be paying for all your audiobooks. Libby is an app that you log into with your library card and you can
That's the problem. I don't have a library card. There's no library where I live. Remember, I have
Libby. Get a library card. You can
250 people in my town. We don't have a library. I'm going to figure that out, you guys. That's what I'm going to figure out is how to get a library card so I can get on Libby.
That's the clip you need to put on Instagram so everybody can peer
judge me.
Get a library card.
Yeah, everybody can help me get a library card. I hope that you gathered something from this. I love reading aloud. Please go to the library, check out some books, sit down, be willing to read the same book for the 4th time. That repetition is so good for their brain. Just say yes to that. Any final words, Keri, before we
end
it?
I think that's all.
Thanks. You're a rock star. Go buy her book, Kisses from Space. It's delightful. Thanks, you guys, for listening.